by former BBC executive and presenter Roger Bolton. Roger, thank you very much. What's your take on whether or not this individual in question should be named, primarily in the sake of public interest, firstly, you could argue, but then also, secondly, to protect other stars? What do you think?
Well, your reporter has just explained very carefully why it can't be done, despite your introduction. And the question you haven't also asked is why is the Sun newspaper, which broke this story and runs with it, itself has not named the individual involved? And there are good reasons for this. I mean, in the past, I think the BBC has been guilty, together with, say, the Roman Catholic Church or the Anglican Church, of putting the institution, the organisation first. In other words, more concerned with protecting itself than the individual concerned. I don't think this is the case here. There are genuine difficulties. Now, what the BBC will have to do in the end, it will have to lay out, and should lay out, the timetable of what it was told when it was told. But we shouldn't rush to judgment. We're dealing now with a situation essentially which is bad on social media and may get worse when we're dealing with deep fake videos and we're dealing with artificial intelligence and so on, which is that there's a raft of allegations on the internet, probably most of them untrue. And if you act on all of them, you'd be taking every presenter off the screen. It might be good for young people who want to come through and get experience, but you can't just go and say, because the social media are full of all this stuff, you should publish the name. You've got two responsibilities, haven't you? You've got, first of all, you've got the responsibility to the individual concerned, the boy or young man who seems to be affected. You've got to protect him. Then you've got the presenter. There will be, I'm not saying it happens in this case, there will be malicious allegations. You have to check them out. You can't just throw people to the wolves. And the other thing here is it's not clear, to me anyway, a criminal offence has been committed. If the boy was 18 at the moment at which money and photographs exchanged hands, that will not, as I understand it, be a criminal offence. It would be if it was done when he was 17. It should be enough to get the guy fired from the BBC as a presenter if that happened, but it wouldn't be a legal offence. And the other thing you've got to remember is that in the past, the BBC have played it wrongly in two ways. One, with a guy called Lord McAlpine, Newsnight alleged he was being involved with abuse. He was entirely innocent. Newsnight got the wrong person and showed his face. So that was a catastrophe. On the other hand, in other instances, you might say about Jimmy Savile, the BBC didn't act quickly enough. When it came to Cliff Richard, whose house was in the end searched by the police, which was a news event, the allegation was, and I agree with it actually, that BBC went over the top, literally with helicopters, to cover it. So you're dealing here with, a real problem about defamation, a real problem about finding out what the facts are, and so on. And a lot of people, and I have to say in your introduction the same, really enjoy kicking the BBC. Well, I've kicked them sometimes, but I don't think they need to be kicked this time. But they, or not yet anyway. You've had Priti Patel, you have all those sorts of people immediately say, kick the BBC. You even have the Labour shadow minister saying BBC must put its house in order. And nobody knows the facts. We don't know exactly. We know 7 weeks ago, I think we're sure, that there was a complaint to the BBC. We don't know what the complaint was. We don't know who it was made to. We don't know allegations. We need to know all of this.
We do. You raise a series of very, very good points, okay? And it is absolutely vital as well. People like you and I, quite possibly for the foreseeable future, are treading an absolute minefield here with this. It is, I would argue, unquestionably, massively in the public interest. And I just wonder where the BBC goes.
No, it's not massively in the public interest. There's a difference.
Is it not?
Between
you see, if somebody, well, no, I'm going to say, wait a second now, Roger. With respect, I let you talk for a very long time there. I would argue that it is. If somebody is paid essentially by the taxpayer and is doing some kind of public service broadcast on our television screens, then I would argue that it is probably in the public interest to have some idea who this individual is. You obviously disagree. Why?
No, there's a difference between the public being interested. Look, I'm interested in lots of salacious gossip, right? We're all like that in private. But, that's not the same as the public interest. There's a public interest in seeing that people aren't condemned with assuming that people are innocent to the point until they prove guilty. And to out somebody in this way without any evidence to feed them to the wolves effectively would be wrong. You've got to have substantial evidence. And the other thing, let me tell you a story back a bit. About 30 or 35 years ago, one of the most famous faces on the BBC was a guy called Frank Boff. And he presented sports programs nationwide, at which I was editor and so on. Uncle Frankie was called. About 5 years after I'd worked with him, whatever, he went into a brothel, dressed as a woman, and took drugs. Heaven only knows what was going on. It is impossible often to guess or to know what people are like inside and what mad things they will do. We're all a bit strange. You can't rush to judgment. You've got to have evidence, because if you do that, it means that anybody can put a rumor up on the internet and destroy somebody's career. You've got to have an evidential base. But once you've got it, you've got to show the public, if you're the BBC in particular, what the evidence is and why you acted the way you did.
Can I ask, from your personal insight, former BBC executive, what do you think is happening behind the scenes at the moment? Because there will be a huge, I would imagine, amount of panic about, did we react to this correctly? You've identified there as well. One of the issues that will be lobbed at the BBC now is there was something brought to you around 50 days ago, and then it was a period of time after that you've had a suspension, etc. They will now be, I would imagine, quite scared of the incoming inquest, will they? What kind of discussions will be going on, do you think?
Well, they might be scared, they might not. I mean, I think it's pretty clear that the Director General, who's a very, by the way, activist Director General, I mean, he really is, didn't know anything till Thursday. And I think if you say, you gave him Thursday to Sunday to act, as he essentially did, that's not bad. So the question is, what happened in those previous weeks until he got involved? And then the question is, what was the evidence put forward? To whom did it go? Was it the investigator? When was it pushed forward? I agree with you. We need to know all of that. But also, what was that initial information? And why does the BBC say that on Thursday, the nature of the information changed and became much more serious?
Okay.
We can only speculate about that. But, there are lots of complaints, malicious complaints, made all over the country about BBC presenters, staff, whatever.
Yes.
You can't just accept them all as being the truth. You've got to check them. But the thing about the BBC is, at the end of all of this, lay it all out in public, the timeline, so we can see what exactly happened. Who knew what, when, and what did they do?
Look, Roger, thank you very much. I must say it's been really insightful stuff, and I've thoroughly enjoyed having this right at the top of the show. It's Roger Bolton there, who's a former BBC executive